Welcome back, class. This is our final lecture before the exam. We're going to be continuing our study today, concluding our study today of the Persian Empire. And today we're going to be looking at the final emperor that we'll be researching, and you'll probably know his name also. His name is Xerxes. Starts with an X, not a Z. Xerxes. And you probably are familiar with him because this happens to be Esther from the Bible. Esther's husband is Xerxes. So, and she became Queen Esther. So this is Xerxes, the Persian emperor, who we find in the Bible. We're going to be looking at him and his life, and then how his empire fell. And then we'll be looking at the rest of the Persian empires. There were four empires total. After the fall of Xerxes, we have three more. Two of them are overlapping in time period because there was a division. All of it still underneath of the Persian umbrella, and they controlled a vast area. And then the final empire under Persia really became dominated by the Greeks, and they began to control much of the area that the Persians had controlled at one time. And then we're going to conclude our lecture and our study of Persia with their main belief of the ancient Persians, which was called Zoroastrianism, a big long word, Zoroastrianism. And this is their ancient belief, and we'll be looking at their main false god and some of their religious beliefs. And so that'll conclude our lecture for Persia and take us into our exam to end this section. So hang on tight. We're going to move now into the PowerPoint, beginning with Xerxes. All right, we're going to continue our lecture here for the history of Persia, Part 2. Just a quick review. These are the names of the emperors that we looked at previously, and they were also found in two of them, Cyrus and Darius, found in the scripture that we looked at. So we see Cyrus, Cambyses, and Darius. We're going to continue now with there's that map of Persia again, if you need that. But we're going to continue here, so we see the three emperors that we looked at, and we're going to continue now into the next emperor called Xerxes. And you may be very familiar with this name, Xerxes. And there's just a couple of pictures. There's a stone relief of him on the right, and then looks like a drawing, some kind of artistic drawing of him on the left. So this is Xerxes. All right, so Xerxes, he 486 to 465 BC. And he also has another name, and this is the name that is actually found in the scriptures. But you'll see that in the Bible in Esther. Ahasuerus is Xerxes in the book of Esther. He was a strong supporter of Zoroastrianism, which is the Persian religious system. Zoroastrianism. He supported that. He was Queen Esther's husband in the book of Esther. And there's some references there. And in the session 2, where this video is, in Moodle, there is a response forum that I would like you to read the passage here. I'll specify the passage in the forum. And I want you to kind of give an outline of what takes place there in a couple of chapters of Esther. 465 BC, he is assassinated by his bodyguard. That's it for Xerxes. So the Achaemenids Empire was the first empire there under the Persians, and it didn't last. It fell. And the reason it fell was in 321 BC, Alexander the Great defeated Darius III. The thing was, Alexander the Great, he had a smaller army, but he had heavier weapons and was able to beat the Persians. He also had better strategy. But Alexander the Great didn't last very long. He didn't enjoy his victory too long because he died 2 years later in the palace of Nebuchadnezzar II in Babylon. That's the same palace, the same Nebuchadnezzar in the book of Daniel. Okay, so now we're going to cover the next three empires under the Persian umbrella. The Seleucid Empire, 323 to 83 BC, was founded by Seleucus, who was a commander of Alexander the Great's elite guard. So he founded that empire. It founded new cities that many Greeks inhabited. So we start seeing now the growth of the Greeks, because then the Greeks would come to power. The Persians would continue on in a very weakened state. They would not be the empire in charge, but they would continue on during the Greeks and even later on into the Roman times. But there was much division in the empire because the satraps wanted more power in their areas. They weren't really following the way the empire was supposed to be going, and so they ended up splitting and existed, and the Seleucid Empire existed alongside the Parthian Empire. Again, it's all under the Persians, but it's two empires, kind of like side by side, if you will. Just kind of think of it that way. So here's the Parthian Empire, 247 BC to 224 AD. Didn't really have a government. Basically, it was a collection of allied peoples, which is in today's Iran. They held several different councils over the time period, and these councils would make decisions about the empire, and they would kind of organize the empire, and they would lead them through these councils. So basically what it came down to is they were allied peoples that allied together to be to have a military force, and so that way they could defend against nomadic peoples. Those are peoples that are travelers, and they would try to travel into the area or take over an area. And they defended against nomadic peoples for 3 centuries, and they were successful in doing that and holding off the nomadic peoples. But the issue happened was they collapsed because of internal struggles. So the Parthians actually collapsed, imploded on themselves. And then the last empire of the Persians was the Sassanid Empire, 224 to 651 AD. So you can see that we're going quite far, a good number of centuries after Christ. So 651 AD. This is also known as the Neo-Persian Empire. Neo means new, so Neo-Persian Empire. They took advantage of the Parthian weakness and toppled the Parthians. They rebuilt an administrative government, because remember the Parthians, they just kind of didn't really have a centralized government. They were just kind of like allied peoples. Well, the Sassanid Empire came in, these Neo-Persians, and rebuilt the administration and the government. They founded more cities. They refurbished cities that had kind of fallen apart. And then they began to introduce crops in, again, this is in the present-day Iran. They began to bring in crops, rice, sugarcane, citrus, eggplant, cotton. And the Sassanid Empire just kind of dissolved away because Arab warriors kind of came in and began to take over, and they incorporated the Sassanid Empire into the Islamic society. So now we're in the time period, we have now gone into the time of Muhammad and the development of Islam, and you can see the Sassanid Empire just kind of slowly dissolve away, coming under the authority of the Arabs. And that's it for the empires. The last thing we're going to be talking about here for Persia is their religious system. They had a religion called Zoroastrianism. This was the early religion of the Persians, and it incorporated many of the Aryan gods. If you remember, the Aryans were the ones that came across the Khyber Pass in what's next to India, and they came across those mountains into the Indus River Valley. And they were called the Aryans. They had conflict with the Dravidians and then ended up marrying into them, and we talked about that during the India lecture. But the Persians incorporated many of their Aryan gods, into their belief system. Zoroastrianism emerged from the teachings of Zarathustra. And you don't really need to know too much about this guy, other than around 30 years old, he started to have visions, or he said he had some visions, and he was convinced that there was a supreme God that chose him to be his spokesman. And this self-revelation, that's what I would call it, self-revelation, he kind of came up with this through this vision. The supreme God, his name was Ahura Mazda, which means wise Lord. And he had these revelations from Ahura Mazda. Now, most of the teachings of Zarathustra were passed down through the generations orally. They didn't really have too much of a written basis to their religion. But then wise magi began to write down the teachings of Zarathustra and Zoroastrianism, and they wrote it down in what is called the Avesta, and that is their sacred text. They also began to collect hymns, definitely hymns that praised Ahura Mazda, in a collection called the Gathas. So you have the Avesta, which is their sacred text, and then the Gathas, which is their collection of hymns. And these are the basis for Zoroastrianism. This is on the screen is the symbols of Zoroastrianism. You can see it there on a rock relief of an ancient ruin. You can see this kind of like bird, man type thing. And then there's an artist image of it on the right. So that's the sign of Zoroastrianism. Okay, Zoroastrianism teachings. Ahura Mazda was the supreme being of Zoroastrianism and creator of all things good. Is this god? Ahura Mazda struggled against evil spiritual forces for 12,000 years. And I don't have information on where that came from in regards to how they came up with a number of 12,000 years, but I guess it was in Zarathustra's writings. Ahura Mazda struggles against evil for 12,000 years. In regards to their salvation, or what goes on in the afterlife, human souls will be judged and rewarded or punished according to the level of holiness in their thoughts, words, and deeds. So if you had good thoughts, good words, and good deeds, you would move on to paradise. If you didn't, you went somewhere else. So you can see there the last two bullet points on your screen. The honest and moral souls would go to paradise for eternal life there in paradise. And then the evil souls would be flung into hell by demons to experience pain and suffering. So that does not sound like a very good time. So this is their belief system, their supreme God. And again, they had other gods. So they had one supreme God, and then they had other smaller gods that they would incorporate into this this religion here of the Persians. And that is it. That is it for our look at the history of Persia. We had 2 lectures on Persia, and that is going to be it. That's the cutoff for exam number 2. So hang on a second. You'll see me. Okay, class, that's it for our look at Persia and also for this section. You have the exam coming up here after this lecture. I'm also going to put up a video for session 3, which is just going to be just a quick statement, advice, just a video that I'm going to make in regards to the exam itself, some details for the exam. So don't miss that video, kind of give you a little bit of a hint or help with what the structure of the exam is going to be. And also don't forget that study guide, which is on Moodle. Print that out, study it, and you should be okay. Other than that, have a great day.